The 70s was about as diverse a time for, the modified division as you were going to have. You still had some of the old coupes that were running and still running well.
You had mentioned cars that were memorable of the era, and I do remember the 318 Coupe.
That's another family. I mean, Ed Bunnell, Donnie Bunnell, it's just, to me, that's Waterford. There's guys at Islip Speedway that maybe didn't know who the Bunnells were. There might be people at Stafford who don't know who the Bunnells are. But if you had any interest in knowing anything about Waterford, there's a name that was just going to hit you in the face over and over. I remember that square top, I think it was a 5-window coupe, 318 was it? It's one of the iconic cars of that period and had a look, it was a Waterford looking car.
The drivers back then, they really raced each other clean. Don was one of those really clean racers, you know what I mean? And I remember getting a few pictures of him with the checkered flag. He was a good racer.
Donnie Bunnell was another wheelman. Drove the family car there. The 318 was always a great competitor.
Donnie was a true class #1 racer. He was a good man.
Another low buck guy that made the most out of everything and raced hard. I always had a saying when I ran, the big names put the people in the stands, the little guys make the race.
I don't think it was a major upset because he was one of the competitors that were in the running for that.
Not to me, because he was fast.
Back then, it didn't matter what kind of a body you had on it, meaning a coupe or a Vega. It was all in your car, your suspension. The body didn't make hardly any difference back then.
I remember seeing that picture. Renee Dugas shot the picture of Don Bunnell on the cover of the Speedway Scene. It was, I think, called New England Speedway Scene back then. And that was big news, even for its day, because at that time, coupes weren't winning very much anymore. And that was a really big win.
And it's Don Bunnell to take the BiCentennial 200, a fine win for Don Bunnell in an old-style coupe.
For that 318 5-window coupe to win the biggest event I think the Speedbowl has ever had, the longest event at any rate, it was a big deal.
You have to understand, I mean, coupes were pretty much, they weren't gone at that point, but they weren't really, for the most part, competitive anymore. And so that win was really, really big. And it made the cover of that paper, which is an extremely prestigious paper for its day. They had that car through, I believe, the 1979 season. Eddie drove it later on, Eddie Bunnell. And then 1980, they came out with a Pinto that, frankly speaking, was not a real good-looking race car. And I think the second night out, they got into the backstretch fence and up into the railroad ties and all that, and it was a nasty crash. Then they brought the coupe back out. So that was kind of interesting. That car, it's almost like, no, you're not supposed to have that Pinto,